Welcome to the Chrysler Museum of Art. My name is Carrie Needell and I'm the Curator of Glass here. And it's been my pleasure to curate this exhibition, Peter Bremers, Ice to Water. And we actually have the artist with us who is going to walk around. We're going to look at the art, have a conversation, and learn a little bit more about the inspiration, the art, everything that you see here. So I'm very excited that we have Peter with us today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And wonderful glass art. But I was curious if you could start this conversation by telling us a bit about the inspiration behind the work and this show that we put together.
Yeah, well, I started working with ice as inspiration ever since I went to the Antarctic in 2001. And I later on went to Greenland and to Spitsbergen. And in those early works, I was mostly fascinated by the beauty of nature. And I assure you that if you ever go to the Antarctic, that's exactly what will happen to you. You lose everything. You just want to absorb the beautiful landscapes. And at the time, global warming was already an issue. I chose not to deal with that so much, but just not at all actually. I just chose for beauty as a thing that our planet gives us, and that is for us to enjoy and appreciate. And being so lucky to actually go to the Antarctic and these other places later, polar regions, you know, I just wanted to express my awe, my total fascination with these landscapes and with these icebergs that are, for a sculptor like me, you know, I called it actually God's sculpture garden. You know, if there is a God and he would create a sculpture garden, it would look kind of what you see in the Antarctic. And so that was my original inspiration. I stopped with that series at some point, and for years I did other series and canyons and deserts and all kinds of different work. But I had this nagging feeling, ongoing nagging feeling, like global warming is a real thing, and how can you not participate in that if that's part of what you're witnessing? Mm-hmm. And for that reason, I went to Iceland and several times and started working on this ice to water collection. So Iceland has been a really interesting inspiration in the sense that the glaciers are melting and shrinking rapidly, and you can see that. You can go there and you can get on the glacier, you can get in the glacier, in the ice caves. You can have this phenomenal experience, but at the same time you're realizing that this is disappearing. Mm-hmm. And my work is an ode to nature. It always is, but at the same time it's also in a very gentle way nudging and saying, hey, this is what we're losing, this is what's going away, and if we don't do something, future generations are never going to experience beauty the way we can do right now. And already glaciers are gone, you know, some of them. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the inspiration.
Can I push you a little bit? And
sure.
And your previous, so 20 years ago you did mm-hmm. glaciers, and it was about the beauty and looking at the glacier, and now it's about that transition from ice to water.
Yes.
Is there a piece maybe we can look at that you can talk
Absolutely.
a little bit about that transition?
Yeah. Shall we talk about this one?
Yeah, that would be a great one.
So what is interesting for me is when you look at this piece and you're right in front of it, it kind of almost looks dull. But then when you start moving around it, it's like that whole, first of all, the color changes, and it's like the whole structure of the piece changes. So you go from this ice cave structure on the right side, you go to a much more watery, almost like there's a waterfall of melting ice, of water coming down. So the whole piece looks almost like it's wet. I mean, most of these pieces have that quality, but what is really interesting about it is that you can only do this in glass. And for me, I don't think I quite have the understanding 20 years ago of how to use the optics to a maximum, and to really work with the inner reflections, the way color changes, just because of your point of view, working with these waves in the piece, all of that really has become a very important part of all these pieces here. And they all have it in different ways. So I'm really trying in one piece to show you the ice, the structure, the experience of the glacier, and at the same time, the experience of the ice melting.
Yeah, you're really able to capture that water and ice at the same time. It's neither one or the other, it's that transition.
Yes, it is a transition. I think all these pieces are very transitional in that sense, in different ways.
Let's talk a little bit about how we're showing these different works. You can put, a work of art on one pedestal and it does something.
Yeah.
But we have a really interesting layout of 5 different pieces over here. They're all individual works. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what's the inspiration for putting them together on one pedestal. Does that matter?
It really does. And it's really, thank you for asking this, because it's really important to me to show this. So, in Iceland, the biggest glacier, Vatnajökull, that's the Icelandic name, is melting rapidly. There's something really interesting about this glacier. It's already pulled back from the sea quite far, but there is what they call Glacier Bay, Jökulsárlón, which is basically where the pieces of ice from the parts of the glacier that naturally break off, because the glacier is always moving, they fall into this lake, and there's a small river, and they can actually find their way through that river into the sea. Now, if the tide and the winds are right, then that ice that's been going into the sea gets thrown back onto the beach. Now, that in itself would be interesting, but what makes it even more interesting is that the beach is black. It's a black lava sand beach. So you get all these melting pieces of ice that are basically on this black sand, and they shine and glitter in the sun, and that's why they call it Diamond Beach. And Diamond Beach is one of these, to some extent you have to understand, there is a huge beauty actually in this process of ice breaking off the glacier and falling in and tumbling in the water and kind of going out through that river and again falling back on this ice, on this black beach. And we've been several times, every time it's different. We've been once, there was no ice at all. So the winds and tides were just the wrong way. But when you look at these individual pieces of ice, they're all different. So there's not two the same. And they all are in different stages of melting. And I tried to create that here with these 5 pieces. I mean, it would have been nice to have black sand, but I don't want to be that literal, because I'm basically an abstract and not a realistic artist. So when you walk around these individual pieces, you will see they change drastically. There's an enormous, I mean, when I look at this piece, when you're here, you see this whole structure, the lens, the sculpted lenses in there. But then when you walk around it, it gets kind of very clear, very transparent, and then all kinds of things start to happen again. And ice is just like that. I don't think there is any other material that comes as close to ice as glass.
I would agree. Well, in talking a bit about glass, there's many ways that an artist can manipulate glass.
Sure.
You can blow it, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
You specifically, every work in here is cast glass, cast in a kiln.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you can tell us why you've blown glass before.
Yeah.
Why do you choose casting glass? And maybe, tell us a bit about your process of how do you make such
Sure.
an interesting work with lots of structure.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. But there's an interesting remark you made, because when I went to the Antarctic I was still doing blown glass. And when I came back, I very much enjoyed, you know, transforming my experiences, my feelings, my ideas into blown glass. But the problem is you can't blow an iceberg. So not being trained as a glass sculptor, but as a sculptor, it wasn't such a big deal for me to get back into sculpting. So all these pieces are made initially in another material, in an industrial form that's about as hard or soft, if you like, as pine wood. And what you see here is exactly identical, but not transparent in my foam originals. You know, you could say that is already the sculpture, but then when it's transitioned into glass, it completely changes because of the four-dimensionality of glass, that you can look at it, through it, and into it. Now, in this specific case, we used a very low expansion glass. And I have to say something about the expression cast glass, because we don't cast like you would in bronze, where you make it hot and liquid and you pour it into a mold. We actually fill the mold with cold pieces of glass. And in this case, we fill the mold with a direction, because we know that in the process of heating up this low expansion glass, which is basically a borosilicate glass, there is this transition that takes place, which is something you normally want to absolutely kind of make sure you don't get.
Avoid.
We love it. Yep. Which is that the outer
like edges or surfaces?
Yeah, the individual pieces of glass, when they get heated up, they go to the devitrification process. And what basically happens is that the outside of the individual pieces changes on a molecular level in structure. It's actually crystallization. But funny enough, when you look at it, you would think, oh, so basically, if I would break this, it would break on one of these lines. It doesn't. It's completely homogeneous.
Beautiful.
But just to clarify the whole process, it doesn't come out of the kiln looking like this. You know, it has a skin. It's not very translucent. So everything needs to be ground and polished. And as we work with open cast molds, if the back is rounded like this one is and you have pieces out of it, that all needs to be done cold afterwards. Yeah. So there's a lot of handwork involved in making these pieces.
They're sculptures. You're a sculptor.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask if we can walk to these photographs that you and I chatted about, you know, how to really make this exhibition impactful on different levels. And so you're not a photographer, but we've included photographs that you've made. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what these photos do with the glass. What do they add? What are they helping us understand when we look at this exhibition?
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, in a way, it's funny. We're all photographers nowadays, right? I mean, we pull our phones out and we
make a beautiful photo.
We take pictures. And when you're in landscapes as beautiful as this, basically you can close your eyes and just shoot. You know, just go click, 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 click. And you'll always have some very, very nice pictures. But what is important to me is that this is not just showing the glacier. This is going into the glacier. You see, in that crevasse, what happens in there with the light and the reflections and the coloration, and also the traces of dust, wind, you know, blown dust from the mountains onto these glaciers, and they kind of get caught in the ice. And you can see it here clearly. You know, it's quite dirty in a way, but actually it all adds to this experience of being on the glacier, in the glacier, and in this case even in an ice cave, and then looking up out of it. And it's like you're in such a magical surrounding. It's like you're, I don't know, I mean, somebody needs to write an opera about ice, I think, because it makes you almost want to sing or shout or do something, you know, but at the same time you become very quiet, because nature does that to you, you know, so you're in awe. And I think the pictures, for me, I have the memory because I've been there, but they help me kind of reconnect with the feeling that I had. And I think here they have an educational importance too, because it kind of shows when you look at a piece like that, where it's coming from, where these colors are coming from. That actually there is a, you know, these structures that are here, you can also see in the pictures. So there's a lot of reference going on in these photographs that really helped to create the work. Yeah.
And I think they also do an amazing job with the color, because I think many people think ice, glaciers, it's clear, it's transparent. And then they might see glass and think, oh, these colors are so artificial, but they're not.
No, they're not.
You see your photos,
absolutely,
and you see all the different hues of blues and greens and purples. It really strikes to the heart of it that it is this amazing color palette that the ice, these glaciers are creating. So I know that you have many favorite works in this gallery, but is there a work perhaps that might hold special significance for you in any way?
Look, they're my diary in a way, you know. I can't really say that this piece is more important than that piece. They all have importance. They all have a story to tell. And to some extent, that's my story. But what I find really important and really interesting is for the public to see these and create their own story. And I think that is one of the beautiful things of this kind of work, and working with glass, working with a four-dimensional material, is that everybody can have their own experience, and they will see different things, they will remember different things. So somebody may walk in here and say, oh, I love that piece, you know, or I love that piece, and then when they look a little longer, then they decide that actually they think another piece is nicer, right? So that, maybe I should point out this piece in a way, because this piece kind of gives you that feeling that all these different, there's more than 100 lenses in here, all these different lenses show you something slightly different.
Yes, they do.
They all show the same, but at the same time it's all different. And I think that's really what is important for me about my artwork. I love the fact that people can have their own interpretation, because it kind of continues the process, the creative process of making these sculptures. So if somebody looks at them and it gives them a different idea, and they share that with somebody else, and they say, well, I actually see this or that. I see an eye in this one, for instance. Then that to me is a very rewarding and interesting interaction, even though I'm not standing here trying to talk to everybody, but you know, I know from experience that people can run away with one of these things, you know, in the sense that it kind of intrigues them, and it may trigger them to have their own thoughts about glass, about ice, about melting, about the whole thing. So it's a dynamic process.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't stop with me.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
If I had one final question, as people are walking around, something that springs to my mind is do you have a particular message that you're trying to communicate, or that you'd love people to take away from this grouping of works?
I would love to share that with you. So for me, the melting glaciers, the disappearing glaciers, this is something that some politicians like to use for their own purpose and deny or don't deny, whatever. But the thing is, anybody who knows about nature and goes out and goes to these beautiful places like Iceland and Greenland and all that, they've seen it, and they're aware that things are changing, and that this beautiful landscape is changing more and more rapidly, and these shrinking glaciers are a reality. You know, climate change is of all times, but this global warming that just accelerates because of us people, I mean, we're part of the whole problem here. That is something that I find important to acknowledge. And in my work, I don't want to be waving my finger and saying, you know, this is what's happening and we need to take responsibility, but I am saying we need to take responsibility in a very gentle way. And it's my way. It's using beauty, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create the beauty of nature, recreate the beauty of nature as a momentum, as a souvenir. I sometimes call them souvenirs of something that's disappearing. And I think to be aware of this and to understand that in your own way you can do little things at home, recycling, things like that. You know, you can start as basic as you like. I'm not saying everybody needs to drive an electric car at all, but you know, it's the awareness. It's the awareness that if we don't do something, then it's a matter of time, and our children and grandchildren and generations to come will never have the experience. I mean, the Austrian Prime Minister came out and said in 2050 we will have no more glaciers in Austria. Iceland is talking about 2200, the year 2200, but it seems to be accelerating so much, it could be sooner. And I can't imagine not being able to see this beauty. So for me, it's trying to put into people's mind, we have a responsibility for our grandchildren, for future generations, to help change this and to reverse the whole global warming issue. So that's my message.
I love that message. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that message.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing it in such a beautiful way with our community and the wider world. I really thank you for your work.
Well, thank you for having me.